What is going on, Princeton? So we're fixing to kick off our ADHD webinar, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to let a few minutes go by to get people going. What is that? Okay. And so if you do have any questions, go ahead and post them. I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as I can on those. But we got another minute or two before we kick off, and then we're just going to dive right into it. If you're on watching, feel free to comment and say, hey, tell me where you're at, where you're watching from, and we're about to kick it off. All right, it's 6:30 on the dot, so let's just go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about a really tough subject for some people, right? And this is kids that are suffering with ADHD. Here in our office, right, we don't like to label these kids. We don't like to give them something to hold on to that labels them for the rest of their lives, because we know that the impact that can have on them can be pretty profound. So what we like to do is actually what I'm going to start off with is just a couple statistics just for your parents out there. So 6.4 million children in the U.S. have been diagnosed with ADHD, and those numbers continue to climb. Of all the children in the U.S., 6.1% of them are on a medication for ADHD. And the reason that I bring this information to you is because you're not alone, parents. There are tons of people out there just like you and your families and your kiddos that are struggling with the same problems and are looking for the same answers. So the way I always kick off talking to this about parents is I like to dive into, what's the end game? Right? And for most parents, what I get back is they want an easier life. They want kids that are easy to get up, easy to get to school, that are with it, where they don't get a lot of negative feedback from teachers, and that's oftentimes what drives us. Now, what our children need the most, right, since their brain and their nervous system is what's processing all the stress of life and allowing them to accomplish this, is they need ease. And that's what we call it in the chiropractic world, is a nervous system that's healthy and happy. So whenever we start diving deep into the history of kiddos like this, I always like to start with the mom, and we like to go back to preconception, right? Or whether or not they have difficulty conceiving. A lot of times, and most of these things, they happen frequently. More than half the time I hear this from parents. But a lot of times there are some conception issues, right? Or the conception process was really stressful because you were worried about it. And then right into that, we go into the birth, right? And are we having a stressful birth, right? Did we have to have an induction? Are we having an emergency C-section, right? Was there excessive pulling? Did we have to use forceps or suction, right? Our obstetricians, their jobs are to get that baby out as quickly and as safely as possible. But a lot of times we don't actually check to see if there were any complications with that. So I like to start there, and then we go into the history as an infant, right? Were we really colicky? A lot of times we have these colicky kids that are crying, that aren't sleeping. They're having a really, really hard time. And then they are the ones that are often sick, right? They're always getting RSV and other illnesses, and we just don't seem to have any answers for it. And a lot of times, as we continue to get older, we say, thank goodness they've grown out of those issues, but a lot of times they actually are just growing into new concerns. And one of the most common ones we see is this hyperactivity, or this constant buzz. They're having trouble focusing. Maybe you're thinking they might have ADHD, or maybe they've even been diagnosed, and they possibly are even on a medication for it already. You'd be in with that 6.1% of children. So that oftentimes is where we find our parents, right? They're struggling. They thought they had answers, but the answers aren't working. Or maybe the answer kind of works, but just it has a lot of backlash that they didn't want, right? And side effects, or kids that are up and down often as far as their emotions go. Now, when these kids come to our lives, Like I said, we don't like to label them. We don't like to jump in and say, oh, your kid's got ADHD, because we don't want to imprint that on them permanently. So what we like to do is we like to try to categorize the issues that they're having, right? And so we've really got three major categories. We've got our expressives. These are our high energy kids. These are the ones that are running around like crazy, that are having trouble slowing down and just processing their environment. So what's going on with them is they have this brain, right, that from birth through conception all the way out into where they are now have been stressed. And so their brain is pumping at this really high speed, and it's spinning and spinning and spinning. And so what they do is they try to make the external environment around them match all the craziness that's going on inside. And so what they'll do is they'll jump and throw things and run out the door. And a lot of times we're the most concerned about these ones because they may have some dangerous tendencies. They're running out the door and out into the street without any thought of the fact that it could be dangerous for them to do so, or they're jumping off the back of the couch. I know that can be scary as well for parents. Now, these kiddos are also oftentimes some of your smartest kids, but they're spinning so fast in school they can't pay attention, and everything that's going on inside the school system is too slow for them. But whenever you hand them a video game or you get them on an iPad, they have a great time, and they focus, and sometimes they focus so well it's hard to get their attention. So it's not necessarily that they can't focus, it's that they need something that's coming at them at the same speed that their brain is processing. And what they really need is to slow that process down, and to slow themselves down and get control of how quickly that brain's moving. And when they do, they're oftentimes some of your most successful kids. Now, the second group, right, these are our internalizers. By the way, that first group we call those raging bulls in the office. The second group, our internalizers, are what we call drunken bulls. Now, these kiddos are the ones that are already so overwhelmed with what's going on that the way they react to it is they shut down. They cannot handle any more input into their system. These oftentimes can be kids with sensory issues that maybe can't stand certain articles of clothing or tags that are on that are rubbing them and irritating them. And so they will oftentimes not be able to handle that, and they'll just completely shut down on you. Now, the third group that comes in is a combination of both. And a lot of times these are your more advanced issues. Sometimes these kids they're trying to label them with autism or other spectrum disorders. And these are the kids that are really, really expressive at first. Right? And they're trying to get their environment going crazy, and they're all over the walls, but then something pushes them too far, and they completely shut down. Sometimes they melt down, but then they internalize all of that, and they just can't communicate anymore. And so they're just completely shut off. Now, my job is it's simple and it's complicated at the same time. So what I'm looking for when someone comes in after I go through this whole process of finding out what that history looks like, all of the stressors in their life, because we know that stress comes at us in three different ways. Right? We've got mental stress, and for our kiddos, you're talking about developmental stress, learning to where they fit in society and in school, and all the stress that comes with friendships and everything like that. You've got your chemical stress, what you're feeding your kids. If they are on medications, they have an impact. Food, water, the air that we breathe, all those things have a chemical effect on our bodies as well. Now, the last type of stress is going to be our physical stressors. Your children, from the moment that they're born, are growing and adapting at this incredible rate in which they are learning new skills, they're developing new habits constantly. And that, even though it's beneficial and it's what you want for your children, can be very stressful on the body, specifically on the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves, the group of which we call the central nervous system. Now, as a pediatric chiropractor, I spend most of my time focusing on this system because I know that these kids are living their lives through that nervous system. Just like in utero, whenever we had stress during the pregnancy, right? we were sharing that nervous system with our kiddos. So when we got stressed and we dumped stress hormones, our kids were getting that same dose. So now they've been wired for that stress. They grow into some of those other issues we talked about as they go into infancy and then into childhood. And when you continue down that road, we've found that you don't necessarily grow out of those other issues, but into more advanced and more difficult issues later down the road. Now, what we do is I use the latest technology to actually assess that nervous system. After this birth process and after all of this craziness, we have this issue that's arised that we've labeled as ADHD or ADD or sensory processing. And we know that it's a disconnect with the brain. And what we do is we throw medications at it and try to come at it chemically, when we simply need to remove interference from that system and allow it to get back to what it was supposed to do. And that is processing the stress and getting rid of it the way that it should. Now, we use neural imaging in here. I use a series of scans that I would be happy to talk in more detail, or you can go look at some of our other posts. We've posted about it several times, to actually see how well that brain is communicating with the body. Because from that birth process on, most likely, unless you've been to a really awesome pediatric chiropractor, probably hasn't been assessed. No one has done any scans or imaging or anything that could actually tell you how well that brain is handling stress and if it's overtapped or if it's right where it needs to be. So we find that stress, we remove that interference in that system, and we get these kids back to doing the things that they want to do to make parents' lives just a little bit simpler. So, big things. On top of, obviously, chiropractic care, there are other strategies that need to be a part of this system. And so one of the biggest ones that I see is diet. Guys, I cannot explain to you how important it is that if you're having children, if you have children or a child that is struggling with some of these issues, it is very, very important for you to be watching what you are fueling them with. All right? We need to cut out things like processed sugar. We need to add in things like green leafy vegetables, and there are tons of techniques for this stuff. There are tons of ways to sneak those things in or to reinforce those habits with your children. One of my favorites being blended greens, a green smoothie, or just simply finding something that they do like and giving it to them frequently. On top of diet, with these kiddos, on top of diet and obviously checking the nervous system, another big important thing for kiddos like this is making sure that they have a routine. Something that's consistent, something that they can own so that they're in control and that they've got tasks and can move in that direction. And so that routine can be really, really important for them. So just to kind of recap a lot of what we talked about. When kiddos come in, we talk about stress, and we talk about it early and often in their life, all the way back to preconception, to the pregnancy, to the birth. Those are all really important for us. We try to find a way to categorize what's going on with them, just for us personally, so we have an understanding, and then we discover what's happening between their brain and their body via neural imaging. These are super safe scans, by the way. They all are sensory. They don't put anything into the body, so they're safe for kids, pregnant women, and we use it on everyone in our office. But the biggest thing, the thing that I cannot stress enough is the role that the brain and the nervous system plays in this whole process. And so we want to make sure that there's no interference in that system, that we make it easy for that brain to control that body so that our kids can start taking back their lives and enjoying things like school and after school activities and even our home lives, because I know it can be very, very stressful for parents as well whenever you are trying to handle these kiddos at home and you've got no answers. And the only answer you've been given isn't really working for you or doesn't really vibe with your family's belief system. So if this is really hitting home for you, and this is something that's going on in your own life, or you have a friend or a family member who is struggling with something like this, have them give us a call. And actually have them mention this webinar, say the Origin Chiropractic ADHD webinar. We'll give you guys a special offer for that entry level, for the consultation, the exam, the neural imaging, and that whole process. I love to hear from you guys soon. I'm going to scroll and see what kind of comments do we have. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. I'm trying to find where I can actually... Well... Sorry guys, I'm trying to find where I can see this at. Okay. I cannot find these. So what I'll do is I'll look at your comments. If we have any questions, I'll be sure to reach out. I'll be sure to reach out to you personally and check those out. I look forward to seeing you guys in the office. We have a lot of fun in here. We like to enjoy the time that our families and our kiddos spend in here, and we are really excited to help you and your family make a huge change. So make sure you reach out to us. Y'all have a great evening, and I'll see you soon.